He ran away with a handsome hero. Would you really give him up for a bumbling country doctor who thinks the only thing he needs to be interesting is a ponytail?
What's wrong with the ponytail? Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I'm a geek, you're watching Kevin the Geek, and welcome back to another Doctor Who review. We're on Series 5 and this episode is Amy's Choice.
Amy's Men. Amy's Choice.
Please do check out this channel for all of my Doctor Who related content. I have done reviews, I have done rankings, I've done reactions, and next week I'm going to have something new Doctor Who related. A different kind of media where I am actually going to be playing a Doctor Who video game. So stay tuned for that next week. I'm really looking forward to doing that one with you guys. But today we are, of course, talking about Amy's Choice. And if you missed one of my ranking videos that I did, oh God, I can't remember, sort of middle part of last year, I actually did a ranking of what I considered some of the best one-time villains that have featured in modern era Doctor Who, and featuring on that list was the Dream Lord.
Well, if you're the Time Lord, let's call me the Dream Lord.
Now I think ultimately Toby is what you think about when most people think about this episode, because he was great in the role. For having a villain who was effectively designed to be pretty much the kind of carbon copy, but the complete opposite of the 11th Doctor, he did a wonderful job. He was able to be, fun and flirty and serious and joyful and dangerous all at the same time. And that's exactly what the 11th Doctor is. And they played it off in a way that it was the complete opposite, yet at the same time, you could feel that he was the exact same man, if that makes sense. And there's been a lot of people who've spoken about this character and said, I would love to see the Dream Lord come back. The problem I have with that is, one, you're always going to compare him to the Toby Jones iteration of him. But I think you've got to get somebody who, if you're going to do it with a different Doctor, you have to find someone who's going to be just as kind of on par with their performance as what the Doctor is. I mean, there's not many people that you could look at and go, this could be a perfect kind of version of that exact same one. I mean, Michael Sheen has been in Doctor Who. I mean, vocally anyway. He didn't actually physically appear. And that's in a story that we'll get to when we start reviewing Series 6. I feel that Michael Sheen, in a way, if he was playing the Dream Lord, he could maybe be the similar and yet the opposite to Christopher Eccleston's 9th Doctor. I think that would kind of work, but it would be really difficult to try and think how you're going to do that. Now, when I did that sort of ranking of my top 10, I put him at number 9, and the biggest reason I said when I did that is because he doesn't exist. And I think that is a fair reflection on the Dream Lord. What he did within the confines of this episode was fantastic, but it wouldn't really work in any other scenario. And I think if you'd maybe done it in a different way, you could arguably have brought the character back. Yeah, I think just ultimately, I think that's just my biggest negative when it does come to the Dream Lord. I would want to have him back so much, but I don't think we realistically can. But let's think about the story now.
So here's your challenge. 2 worlds. Here, in the time machine, and there, in the village that time forgot. One is real, the other's fake.
This was a great way of dealing with Amy's sort of internal conflict and her kind of feeling that she has where she's unsure whether she's ready to get married and whether she's ready to truly commit to Rory. And the seeds have been sown for a few episodes. Obviously, we learn in the opening episode, right at the very end of it, when she goes in the TARDIS, that she is due to get married. And then at the end of the Angels two-parter, you have that scene where she, snogs the face off the Doctor. Still not a fan of that. And so the Doctor, in a way, tries to force her to kind of realise that Rory is the one for her. But he doesn't quite manage to succeed. And when I was re-watching the episode on this occasion, what I think I figured out is the fact that the Doctor knew early on that these were both fictional scenarios. He knew exactly who the Dream Lord was, and he could have stopped it a lot earlier. He could have forcibly killed both pairs of them, but chose not to, because he realised, I think, that he couldn't force Amy to be ready to commit. She had to figure it out on her own. And this is what that entire episode revolves around. And the metaphor that you go for how she goes about that, I think is really strong. And everything ties in really well. Like, the set, you could argue, is just, it's a basic set. It's a TARDIS, it's a bit cold. Or it's a simple little village. But again, when you think about the metaphor of what they stand for, Upper Ledworth, and the whole scenario around it, and you could talk about the costumes tying to it as well, the fact that it is Rory's ideal, and that it is him being a doctor, an actual doctor, as his way of overcompensating against the Doctor and his insecurities in that regard. The fact that Amy is pregnant, that it is the ideal life that Rory probably wants. And then for the Doctor, in his environment, the one that he probably feels initially is so strongly the real world, because it is all those familiar things. And I think you have to think about as well, from the Doctor's point of view, why he probably feels that pull more, for the cold star kind of scenario, is because of the fact that he enjoys nothing more than exploring and finding out new things. That is why he, as a Doctor, continues to travel. He likes to learn new things and to be proven wrong about things. And that's why, when they're like, oh, a cold star, there's no such thing. It can't. Stars burn hot. It's like, no, this could be something that happens in this weird and wonderful universe that we just so far have not experienced. I mean, to be honest, in reality, I'd love to be able to ask this question to like Brian Cox or to like Neil deGrasse Tyson or anything like that. If anyone's got their contact details, let me know, because I really want to ask this question. Is a cold star possible? My limited science knowledge at all, and probably from having watched a few videos from people like those kind of people, cold, it's not possible to burn cold. Cold is in effect the absence of heat. So you can't generate coldness. You can only remove heat and bring the temperature down. That's my understanding of it. And so that's, logically where they're coming from. And they should be thinking like that. However, in this wonderful Doctor Who universe, we can go down the routes of having something that is purely bonkers and ludicrous. But they do it in a way that it makes sense. And like I said, this whole episode is just that wonderful, wonderful, just metaphor for everything. As an overall episode, when you try and break it down to the real nitty gritties, it is a great episode. It's not truly top tier, but it is definitely above average. And I do have good feelings for this episode. Yeah, there are a few things that will let it down. And like one of my biggest criticisms, and again, maybe they've lent into this intentionally, but the fact that you've got these ecnidines in this other world, which again is probably why the Doctor probably is so quick to dismiss it, that he recognises what these aliens are and he knows who they are, what they want, he's answering their questions so quickly. Again, that's why he's going, no, this isn't what I look for. I know these things. This is easy. That is weird and bonkers and peculiar, and so that is why I feel so sure that this is the real world. But they went down such a big route of going, these are old people, they live way beyond their years, and it's because these aliens are keeping them alive. In reality, they weren't actually that old. I like the idea of that, but I think they should have committed fully to it and gone down the route of making them like really anciently old, like making them like well over 100, because they were just going, the people here live well beyond their 70s. I mean, in modern day, in most kind of Western civilizations, particularly in the UK, a lot of them do live into their 70s and beyond. So that in and of itself wasn't necessarily that good, in that regard. But yeah, this episode, it has so many good stuff to it. And I'm at this point that I have to start considering Rory in the companion section when I do my rankings. Because if you haven't seen these reviews before, I give each category a score out of 10 to give an overall score out of 100. So there's 10 categories in total. Things like the story, the Doctor, the companion, the villain, and so on and so forth. And I was reluctant to put Rory in the companion category last time out, but with the fact that Amy is now choosing him and is now effectively a regular on board the TARDIS, okay, after next week's review, that may change for a little bit, but he is fulfilling the companion role, and the dynamics between them is great. The supporting cast, I was struggling to know where to put this one, because you've got the villain, which of course is the Dream Lord, but you've got a couple of like non-speaking people that kind of come into the van when the Doctor's trying to save them, and then you've got the old people who are the villains, sort of. So I had to be fair in this one and probably put the Egnadine old people in the supporting cast one for this one, and that is probably where this episode was mostly let down. They didn't add a lot in terms of their support to the role. As a concept they did, but as the people they didn't really as such. So I'm going to wrap up the review there. So I'm going to now give you my scores for this episode. So I do all of this with all of my episodes so I can actually fairly rank them when it comes to it. I've already done a ranking in November where I did a ranking of all of the episodes from the Russell T Davies era. You can go check that out. I've done loads of different rankings for Doctor Who across various different things. And once I'm finished with the Stephen Moffat era, I will do another one. And then maybe I'll have to do a combined one between the Davies and the Moffat era. So let's check out my scores for Amy's Choice. So Amy's Choice has scored 80 marks out of 100, which means that it is a B+ rated episode. Very similar to a few episodes that we've had so far in this series. And I do like this episode. I think it's better than I always have my memory of, because I always think back to the Dream Lord. The other stuff, not quite as much. So, is that a bit unfair to mostly remember it for that? I mean, let me know what your thoughts are with this episode. But next week, we are going for another two-parter. And the third returning villain in this kind of series. We've obviously already had the Daleks. We've had the Weeping Angels. Next week, we're going to have the Silurians. But they are, of course, a brand new appearance for New Who. They, of course, were a classic villain back in the day. And so this was a chance to show them off to a new audience. So we're going to check that out next Wednesday. And then next Thursday is when I do my playthrough of the first episode of the Doctor Who Adventure Games, which was a free game that was released around this time, to coincide with Series 5. It was free on the BBC website. I couldn't ever play it at the time because my computer at the time, back in 2010, was absolute rubbish. But I've been able to find a way to download it, and I will also include that in the description of that video, so you guys will also be able to download it and play it for yourselves as well. So make sure you join me for those next week. But for today, my name's Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.